This next section of the day dives into winning strategies declassified. And we're gonna kick it off with Countdown to Launch. Now, Countdown to Launch, as I said earlier, it kind of is going to be a deep dive with Mayo and Better. And we're really fortunate to have Leslie Ziegler. She's a founder of Leslie Ziegler Consultant. However, her fun fact is kind of cool. So Leslie and her friends spent a year cooking bugs. And now it's a burgeoning company. So she'll be holding court tonight at the Redwood Room, and I guarantee you guys are going to want to inquire what bug made the final cut.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill. That's actually true, and it sounds gross, but it actually is it's a pretty interesting thing. Bugs are the new thing, but that is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to get raw about what it's really like for startups to work with big companies. So, okay, I have no idea who's in the room. How many entrepreneurs are here? Raise your hand. Sweet, okay. How many corporates? Cool. VC? Okay, so pretty good mix, but mostly entrepreneurs, so maybe we'll stick to that. So I'll let these guys just briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll get down to it.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff. I'm been in digital health for a long time. I co-founded a company called Health Hero Network and sold that to Robert Bosch in telemedicine a couple of years ago now. It's been a little while. Took some time off after the acquisition and worked with Rock Health, a few of the folks that are here, and did some mentoring and angel work and things like that. And about a year and a half ago, started a new company because I just couldn't get enough of the entrepreneur lifestyle, and started a new company with Mayo Clinic and Social Capital as the investors, and Mayo also as a strategic partner. And we'll get raw, it sounds like, as we talk about that, which I am not. We got 23 minutes to totally go there, so that's fantastic.
I'm David Herbert. I'm chair of part of Mayo Clinic called Global Business Solutions. We've been charged with helping Mayo to connect with 200 million people a year by 2020. We see about 1 million patients a year now. We've got for those of you not familiar with Mayo, we're a large integrated clinical research education practice. Just celebrating our 150th year based in Minnesota, Florida, Arizona, the upper Midwest. We've been innovating in a number of areas, and one of the things we're trying to do through this strategy that our group has been charged with helping to push is connect with people who may never come to Mayo Clinic. We think we've got a responsibility, a moral responsibility, not in the sort of religious sense of the word, but to take knowledge we've built through our patient-oriented practice and deliver it to people if it can be useful. And that might also help them know who we are should they ever need top acute care like we provide at Mayo Clinic. So one of the things we've been doing is partnering with companies like Better or getting involved in startup companies that can help us get to that goal. There's no way we feel that we can do it alone. So we have to do some disruptive things and definitely some partnered things.
So obviously, also Jeff left a very important thing out of his bio, which is he was voted most valuable mentor for like the first 2 years of Rock Health by all of our classes, which was pretty great. There's also a printer.
There was only 2 of us.
The Jeff Klatt Memorial Printer. Have we forgotten these things?
Can I remind you again, if you say memorial, it sounds like I died. So,
Well, so I mean, David, your explanation of kind of how this happened is, I think, a pretty good entry point. You know, why Jeff and why Social Capital? Like, what makes you know, a 150-year-old company choose like a crazy venture firm, not crazy, sort of crazy, a little crazy, and Jeff? What was kind of the criteria? Like, how did you make that decision?
Could you start with the Jeff part?
Yeah, we were looking for the most valuable mentor of Rock.
And she was busy, so that was me.
Well, with the goal that I just mentioned that we had, we felt we needed to partner. And one of the areas that we were really targeting to hit those goals of connecting with consumers in a bigger way and connecting Mayo knowledge to them was finding scalable digital products. And so how could partners help us in that arena? It's in the area of technology, it's in the area of market growth, and it's in distribution channel. So what led us to Jeff, actually, was a first stop. Mayo Clinic is an investor in a venture capital firm called Social Plus Capital. So we know the principals there very well. We were meeting with them, describing our new goals and strategies. And together we said, we should put this into a startup company that's focused on the goal of providing personalized knowledge to people in a smartphone and really make that differentiated in the market. So it started with Social Capital, but it was predicated on let's find a startup company and in a matter of months, which is Lightspeed for Mayo Clinic, get a product out the door, a minimum viable product. And as we met with Social Capital, they said, we've got just the guy that could do that. And some persuading was needed, and I think they accomplished that. But that's what led us to Jeff. And when we heard his capabilities, we thought, bingo. There's some other elements of what made that good, too, that I can talk about later, too.
So speaking of Lightspeed for Mayo Clinic, Jeff, if you had to measure the amount of time it took in bottles of wine consumed to get this partnership off the ground, how many bottles would that be?
I knew the minute David said, I was like, I know what the follow-up question is going to be. I think, look, so fundamentally, we're joking about being raw, but I think David and I, so Mayo's both an investor, they're a strategic partner, they're an LP in Social Capital. There's nothing that we're going to say on this stage that's going to drive us apart. And it's of no value to any of you in the audience to hear us just talk about how awesome each other are, although feel free to continue. So let's be honest. I would not have done this. The company didn't exist when I had my first meetings with Social Capital, and they asked if I'd be interested in starting a company with them. And if you know Chamath, he can be quite persuasive. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to do it once I understood who the players were. Because one of the things I learned through Health Hero and some really dark times where if you don't have a great clinical partner or clinical sales that you've already made, for us, the magic pill was the VA. As soon as we got the VA and we got 90% market share in the VA, everything else just took off. And before that, we were selling readmission products 15 years before ACA. That tells you how stupid I am. So I think that the Mayo part was really important. That said, there are days I want to strangle them, and there are days they want to strangle me. And they're usually around exactly the stereotypes that you would expect about speed. But I'll give you an example. You've got to learn, if you're working with somebody like this, whether it's the VA or, in our case, an investor or strategic partner, you've got to learn, like, where is that thank God they act that way moment? And for me, it actually was a really funny thing. It was the logo. Now, I cannot explain to you without swearing profusely how that felt at the time. And then all of a sudden one day, where everybody does their best thinking in the shower or the car or wherever it is, I realized, oh my God, this is actually awesome. It is awesome they're giving me this hard a time. Because you know what I know? There is not another person in the world that gets to use that logo, gets to abuse that logo, perhaps print the wrong shade of blue of that logo. The reality is that some of those things that exist that your partner has are going to be super frustrating. But once you're able to activate them, they are so powerful for you as a partner. And so I think that was one of the things. So David mentioned, we went from literally not having a company to being on stage showing a very early version of the product in 4 months. And there were times that was ungodly in its pain. But David's team in particular, when we sat down and said, what's really important here? An agreement's probably a good idea, Do we really need to show the logo? No. We can get away with that. So I think one of the things that I would take away from this is that if you can learn what's really important and then learn where your partner's values are and say, that's actually really good, like understand why they're good and vector off of that value, then you're fighting about the stuff that really matters, not the stuff about what size the logo is, which sounds stupid now, but when you're in that sprint, you get that way. You're like, what do you mean I've got to left justify it? It's like, who cares? That was not important. But it became important because it felt like this between a startup and a big company, and it turns out it didn't have to be at all. So.
What do you think this relationship has brought to your team? Because I mean, obviously it's been very close, both as an investment, as really collaborating to build the product itself. The nurses have been a really key part of that. But I would say the whole, it feels like many different pieces of Mayo have touched this. So what have you guys learned kind of from that experience?
We've learned tons, and in fact, we've talked about trying to bring people in so our part of Mayo Clinic is considered a more entrepreneurial part, even though when we're talking to Jeff, we're like Amish.
You know what that means? At 3 o'clock, he gets to loosen his tie just a little bit. That's what that means. So,
When we're at his office, we don't wear a tie,
Yeah.
but
See them
kind of getting
coming
out there.
awesome.
But they've taught us, so we want to expose our staff to say, listen, decisions are occurring out in the market at a much faster clip. Businesses are being launched without a business plan, as this one was, with the goal first being to get a minimum viable product out and then adjust. That's something our culture wasn't very adapted to. You do that in a medical setting, people can get hurt. And being physician-run organization, it was tough to sort of blend that culture. So we learned how to bridge to that culture. And we want to teach our team that the world's moving a lot faster clip. Some of what's behind this strategy of connecting with 200 million people is the sense that if we don't figure out how to move faster, take advantage of technology and getting useful products and services to where people are so they can use them on their own terms, we could be very vulnerable in those three geographies we're on. So we not only have to get products out there, but adapt to the sort of world that they're running in. So Better has taught us that. And even this is going to sound like we can't say anything negative, but even when Jeff's whining about something or complaining about something that, and there's some things he'll bring up, it's almost embarrassing when he does, because he's right, like it's left justifying. And then there's other things he'll bring up which are the crown jewels, and they're who we are, and they've served us for 100 years and will serve us for another 500. And we have to be able to look at those and decide which ones can evolve and should change and which ones are who we are. And I really liked how Better is, there's no shyness. We just had a board meeting this morning, and
there was no shyness.
We let it all hang out, and that's very useful to us to learn about those challenges.
If you had it to do over again and you were entering the relationship, because I mean it's like a marriage between the two, between really the three, right? You guys are all so intertwined with each other, and it's a really interesting relationship. What do you wish you'd known both as the CEO and also as someone who's got a lot of experience? You had a ton of experience with Health Hero. Like, what was different about this? Because you started with, I don't think most of the entrepreneurs in the audience have the good fortune to automatically just start with a relationship with the Mayo Clinic. So how do you think that that informed kind of the way that the company developed?
I think that we did. I said this on another speaking event maybe last month. We had two very unfair. Everybody who funds startups or works in startups is always saying, "What's that startup's unfair advantage?" I would love to tell you that that's our team and our people, and I think that's very true. I couldn't be prouder of our team. But on paper, our unfair advantage was, on day one, financing was done. We had a check. We didn't know what we were building. We had money, and we had Mayo Clinic as a partner. That's just obscene in some ways. But I think the thing that I would do differently, I think two things. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, and if you tell anybody this, I will kill you.
I think it's going to be on the internet, Jeff.
Yeah, that big camera thing. I would move to Rochester for a month. I would have gone to Rochester and spent a month rather than a couple of days here or there, Rochester being headquarters, and just spent more time listening, I think, because, and I'm very transparent, I'll tell you all the screw-ups. I think because of my experience, because we had money, because we had top-tier investors, because we had Mayo, I think the first month was kind of like, so let me tell you what we're going to do, Mayo. And there wasn't enough listening. And so I think if I would go to Rochester and shut the hell up and listen. And I think there's a lot. So look, big companies are annoying, right? I sold my last company to Bosch. I spent 3 years there. Don't even ask.
Best 3 years of your life.
Yeah, best 3 years of my life. In Germany, basically. I spent most of my time there. And there was a lot of really annoying things when your spirit or your goal is entrepreneurial. But just like with Bosch, what you learn really quickly, and what I learned really quickly about Mayo is Mayo Clinic can be annoying. please don't tweet them. However, the people of Mayo Clinic, every single one of them, wants to do the right thing. Sometimes they're caught up in certain cultures, they're caught up in certain things, they're caught up in certain paths or certain ways that they're doing stuff. But the individual people, so by going and listening and spending more time with more people, I wouldn't have had that Silicon Valley kind of, hey, we've done this once before, we know what we're doing, we've got all this stuff figured out. It would have been, look at all these amazing people. Yeah, okay, I'm annoyed by this. I really don't want to wear a tie. I really, all of those little things, but the people and getting more time with the people. Because the people inside of all these organizations, be it Mayo or Kaiser or name your big kind of Bosch, huge organization that kind of feels like they're stumbling around. The people are great. They're just usually trapped inside of structures that don't allow that greatness to come through. Listening could have fixed that. So I would have. And it was January when we started the company. I can't believe I just said I want to spend a month of January in Minnesota, but that's what I would have done.
I think actually it would be far more appropriate for David's team to come to San Francisco for a month.
We tried.
Yeah, I mean, so, honestly, other than
Yeah.
hanging out in San Francisco in January, which beats the hell out of Rochester in January, what would have been something early on that you think could have been better from your perspective?
I don't want to make it sound like it's all been a bed of roses, but I think it's gone really well from early on. I think Jeff did a good job. It might have been to immerse more, not that we were backing off or being standoffish, but almost the opposite of what Jeff said, so that we'd be better able to enable and empower certain elements, because probably some of the frustrations Jeff hasn't spoken about would be around, God, we really need to do this, we need to do it by tomorrow. We need an answer from you. And in fact, we've set up bringing teams out here, having them spend a week, sometimes more. And I probably would have done more of that. But I think Jeff's, even though he's saying he should have spent more time, I think one of the keys to success is he understood sort of who we are, our peculiarities. And he didn't just sort of kiss up to us on everything, but I think he recognized some of those from the get-go and evolved on other ones, but then he'd push hard on other things that made the product better. We had really interesting conversations about how better will connect out to physicians so that they're as supportive of it as the consumers who want to use it. And initially we thought, and all those physicians will of course be Mayo or Mayo affiliates. And well, you don't connect with 200 million people if there aren't physicians way beyond Mayo who are excited about that. So that's been great learning for us.
Good fun.
You look like you have something to say.
No, it's just, I think that's the other thing, that when you work with big companies that is so exciting is the entrepreneurs. I think most of them are in this area when you asked about the hands. I mean, the thing is that they're going to push you to think in scope. I mean, literally the problem they brought to me was, how are we going to connect with 200 million people? It's like, that's awesome. Like, that's a hard problem. Like, who wants to do a bunch of petty little stuff, right? Now, it's funny because when, the other member of the board worked on 1 billion people at Facebook, of course, he's like, only 200 million? Why aren't you moving faster? But so it's actually really interesting, I think, that synergy of Silicon Valley and healthcare and finding those points where they come together, that there are these huge, hard problems. It's like, let's go solve them. Like, who wants to build another app? Like, God, great. Let's have another step tracking app. That'd be fantastic. It's like, these are really hard problems. And so the bigger companies and the bigger points of view, they tend to think in really big things and have really big ways. Now, they might think it's a 20-year plan to get there. And part of your job is to push them to think, no, let's do that in 5. But the fact is they can present much more interesting challenges and much more interesting things to solve. And I think that's part of it that's just so exciting. So that makes it worth it. Makes some of the pain worth it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of pain, I mean, we can sit here and pick on big companies all day, and make fun of them because they're slow and, but the reality is, you've got, how many people work at Mayo globally?
60,000.
How many people work at Better?
A little less.
Order of magnitude less?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah.
Counting contractors and people that walk by the building. So.
Yeah, I mean, so like even on a team basis, right? So like you're building this team, you've got, 20 people now. How do you evaluate kind of who you're hiring and creating those relationships between, so that it's not just you? I think this is something that's really important for for startups, which is, you can't just have the CEO own every relationship because it doesn't scale. So how do you look at kind of, how to manage those relationships, and how's that gone?
Well, so let me start by admitting that I was a horrible micromanager for a long time at Health Hero, and I was very bad at a lot of those things, and it was probably my weakest trait, or one of many. And I think that was something that I had to learn, and something that I would pass on to other entrepreneurs is like, hire people you trust, fire the ones you don't. If you cannot trust that person to do that job at this amazing level that you would be equal or better to yourself, and hopefully 10 times better, then fire them. They shouldn't be there. Doesn't mean you can't be their friend, doesn't mean you can't work with them, but you're in survival mode from the minute you get that money in the bank account. So I think that for me, that's been a passage, because looking back on that, there's things I did and ways I acted and stuff like that where I'm just like, God, that's so embarrassing. But I think your job, and a lot of times as a CEO in a partnership between large organizations and your own startup, is to broker that. Your job is not to let the Mayo culture become your culture, or the Bosch culture become your culture, or whatever that is. You've got to keep that culture, and when you hire, the people that you hire have to embody what your goals are. And a lot of your job is simply to buffer that and to be the voice of reason, be the sounding board, be whatever it is when people are like, oh, they're moving so slow, or I can't believe they asked me for this thing. And at the same time, when David and I sit down and talk, and he's like, why is that person on your team keep bothering us about, there's like different things where you have to buffer, but you can't own it. You just can't own it, because the more connections, again, why I would have moved to Rochester is the more connections, the more FaceTime, the more people. Companies succeed or fail at a business relationship level on the relationships between people, right? There is no relationship between Better and Mayo. There's a relationship between David and I. There's a relationship between Scott and I. There's a relationship between the NurseLine team and Paul. There's a relationship between all those people. And so if that relationship is one person, the chance that somebody at Mayo thinks I'm an a-hole is pretty high. The chance that they think everyone on my team is an a-hole is pretty low. And so the ability to get all of those people and empower them to be great also makes the fabric of that relationship so much stronger. If it's one person that is the weakest link in your most important business relationship, ridiculous. That's just ego speaking. And I say that from experience, unfortunately having done that. So for me, it's the fabric of the relationship and getting those people to own those things and have all those touch points. Because we've been live for 60 days. They've been live for 150 years, right? I mean, like you've got to find a way to get that fabric out there and have your culture be defined in a certain way. So for me, that's how we go about kind of building the team and trying to interweave it with 150 years of Mayo culture.
So how does 150 years come back to, 60 days?
Well, for those entrepreneurs out here, I think you've got a real opportunity. I don't think Mayo is alone in recognizing the changes in healthcare. One of the fun things, or sort of ironic things, is we meet with Social Capital, and Jeff, a lot of the venture group and entrepreneurs are licking their chops at all the change going on. It's darn hard in the healthcare. It's hard, and it's going to get harder, and in a couple more years, we're going to have to do more with less and more with less. This is all change we have to make. We're aiming to do it. So those are the things that lead us to wanting to link with entrepreneurs. So to the extent you can come in, if you're interested in partnering with a bigger existing group, there's an appetite there of needing to get on board that change, whether they're going all the way into it or experimenting, and bringing that match of cultures. I don't think it means one is subsumed by Mayo or we abandon our history. We figure out the complementary elements, but recognize how valuable it is that you'll be bringing them those attributes that, at least at Mayo, we recognize some of those things. Our DNA is in providing really, really good patient care to people who are often have no other resort, and that will remain one of our top priorities. And that builds certain outlooks and time frames and ways of doing things that we do really well, but as we get into the startup realm, it's different. If you can sort of project that, you're going to be a very attractive partner, just as Jeff and his team is. So one of the fun things for us is we'll bring out, coming out next week with our Dean of Practice and our COO, to meet those 22 staff that Jeff talked about. It's incredibly energizing to us to see sort of the version of the people that are going to deal with the change that we're contending with.
If anybody wants to see the COO of Mayo handle a Nerf gun, you can come by our office next week.
Or quadricopter.
Just don't
Or a
shoot,
quadricopter.
don't shoot her with it.
It's going to be amazing.
Not something that usually flies around the halls of Mayo, I'm sure. So since we're running out of time, quickly, just, is there anything we haven't covered or any words of advice you have for everyone out here, whether it's, someone in venture who wants to get one of their companies in front of someone like Mayo, or it's, an entrepreneur trying to figure out how to navigate this complicated maze?
Well, as you may have inferred, we're not a big investor. We do some investments, sort of a partnered investment arm, but we're doing a lot of partnering through our global business group. We have a tech transfer venture arm. That's where I was before, as well as a commercial laboratory. So we've got a fair amount of business activity at Mayo. So if what you're doing is a fit with Mayo Clinic, there's a lot of potential ways we could link with you.
I think my advice would be both for entrepreneurs and just generally people in the space is that if you're not solving a problem, no one wants to hear your story. VC doesn't want to hear your story. Mayo doesn't want to hear your story. You've got to understand exactly what your problem is that you're solving and find exactly the people in the organization for whom you're solving it. And then everything else is easy. And I know that sounds so fundamentally simple, but so few people are actually doing that, which have defined a problem set, said this is how we're actually solving it, this is the problem we're actually going to go after, this is what we're actually going to do, and find the right people in that organization. Because like I said, the people within Mayo that we meet, we've probably met 200 of the 60,000 that we're working with very closely on things. 100 of them are doctors who have shaped the product. They all have amazing points of view and provide a lot of value, but it had to start with saying, are you the right person, because this is the problem we're solving. If you're looking to solve this problem with medical imaging over here, we're not the person. So I think don't think of Mayo or Bosch or Kaiser, any of these things as that brand. Find that person or that group of people who are trying to solve the problem that you solve, and that's the core of every great partnership.
Cool. Well, I think we're out of time.
Great way to end this. Thank you guys so much. Fantastic session.